Mhm.
Welcome to Porch Play Chats, sponsored by the American Association for Promoting the Child's Right to Play, or more affectionately called IPA-USA. IPA-USA is the USA affiliate of the International Play Association, and we call that IPA World. In our efforts to promote play, we've introduced Porch Play Chats, and these are conversations on a variety of topics with folks who are just as passionate about play as we are. You can find more information about IPA-USA by visiting our website, IPAUSA.org. Up in the top right-hand corner, be a friend on our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And every Monday, magically, a new Porch Play Chat will appear. So I'm Deb Lawrence, and I'm the president of IPA-USA. And with me on the porch is Lisa Murphy. Good morning or afternoon or wherever you are, Lisa.
Good morning. Good morning.
And
I'm really on the porch today. You can tell because I'm going to be overexposed and then in the shadows for about the next 15 minutes.
So she'll fade in and out, but she's here. We're happy to have her. And with us on the porch is Peter Dargatz. And Peter is the proud father of 3 nature-loving children, a national board-certified teacher, and the coordinator. And so here's what is the most exciting, other than, of course, his wonderful children. He's the coordinator of a public school nature kindergarten at Woodside Elementary in Sussex, Wisconsin. So listen, if Peter can do it in Wisconsin, you can do it everywhere, right? So Peter transitioned his classroom from inside to outside, and has allowed which has allowed him to create and develop his 4 Ps philosophy. And he's just written a book that I will make sure I post again, so you have a model to follow, because if Peter can do it in Wisconsin, it can be done everywhere. So his 4P philosophy focused on play-based, place-based, project-based, and personalized learning, which, you know, relationships are the most important. And this philosophy has cemented in play his citizen science, service learning, and community collaborations. Along with Nature Kindergarten Program, Peter's the coordinator of an all-school collaboration with the Retzer Nature Center, which again sounds cool, and a district-wide family nature club. He's a volunteer coordinator for the Ice Age Trail Alliance's Tyke Hike program, and which is aimed at getting young children out into nature, which is really important. He's a founding member of the Wisconsin Nature-Based Early Childhood Association and a member of the Wisconsin Association for Environmental Education. And he's also a contributing author to Natural Starts Alliance. And I love that website. So Peter, if you could throw that website in to your resources that you're sending. Sure. It's awesome. And Peter's first book, Teaching Off Trail, is released by Redley Press, and we'll give you all that information. So, oh my goodness, Peter, we are so glad to have you. And so the question that we have that might help other people figure out if they want to take their public school kindergarten in a closed classroom and put it out in nature, what motivated that transformation to play-based, nature-infused classrooms?
Well, first off, thanks to Deb and Lisa for having me, and thanks for IPA-USA for hosting these wonderful porch chats. I've enjoyed watching them and connecting with some of the people that I've seen. But when I had the idea of changing and transforming my education, it was really based on 2 specific individuals. And I'll go back to story time here. In about 2013, I was in the midst of kindergarten, and anyone that's been in the kindergarten classroom in the last few years realizes that kindergarten is not what it used to be. When I walked into my kindergarten classroom coming from 4th grade, not really knowing what I had to do or what I was expected to do, but knowing I really wanted to work with younger kids, I kind of saw that kindergarten was a lot different than what I expected. There weren't a lot of toys out. There weren't a lot of games out or art pieces. A lot of those things were kind of shoved away or stored away in closets and maybe brought out on special occasions. So knowing that I was new to this, that's kind of how I developed my first years of kindergarten classroom. I did have a lot of bright colors everywhere. I had a lot of very organized shelves and a lot of academic centric things all over the wall, just to really show and prove that, look what my kids are learning. And I was doing really well at that. My kids were doing great. They were achieving great data scores. Our school and grade level report cards that, help support funding for our district and through our state, were all doing really well. And in the school year of 2012, 2013, I had a very, 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 very smart young lady who was very motivated to do everything she could academically. I joke that I probably stunted her development having her in my classroom. She was already smarter than I was. I was just a little bit taller, but she was writing poetry and research papers on her own. She was doing multiplication facts just for fun. She was reading all sorts of stories and really doing a great job of discussing them and talking about them and coming up with her own comprehension questions that she would then answer to herself and write in her own reading journal, and just doing all these things above and beyond, way more than I ever expected or necessarily pushed her to do. And she was doing great things on test scores, and everything looked really great and grand. And, that proud peacock moment of, look what I'm doing in my classroom, look at the children that are coming out. It's so wonderful. Well, kindergarten in May and June can sometimes be a survival mode. And you really want to just, get to summer, because the kids, they've been working really hard all year, but they know it's coming and it can be a little bit of trick. So I decided, I really got to change things up a little bit. So once I was kind of finished with most of my curricular responsibilities, I went into that closet and I brought out those games and those puzzles and those art supplies and those loose parts and just all those things that had been collecting dust. And I saw 23 out of my 24 students that year completely change. Their eyes were open. They were showing sides of their personality that I hadn't seen. They were showing signs of happiness and engagement that I had kind of hidden away when I was not allowing them to have those moments. But I saw one individual who really started to flitter and fail. And my academic shining star didn't know what to do. She had lost complete control over everything because it wasn't academic. She didn't know how to problem solve. She didn't know how to initiate play. She didn't know how to act as a kid. She was so focused on academic. And I saw that. And I noticed, oh my gosh, all these great things that I'm noticing with kids, all these deficiencies that I saw they had in their data were easily wiped away when they could choose the method of how they showed what they known. Now, it was also an emotional time for me. My daughter was born that April. And I came to the realization watching these 24 children that I would not want my child to be in a classroom that was run the way I was running my classroom. And for me, that was the game changer. So I knew I had to do something. I didn't know what it was, but I knew I had to do something. And seeing those little tidbits of joy and engagement with those kids when I brought out just simple things that every classroom should have, I thought, what, maybe I have to look more at a play-based environment and just see how I can make these moments more a regular part of the routine. So I spent some time just researching on play and learning about play and just talking to people about play. And in those research and discussions, I found so many great resources and so many great ideas. But I also found an article about taking kindergarten kids outside. And I read that article. It happened to be written by a person who was local to me. She had since moved, but the article was written when she was running a nature preschool called the Schlitz Audubon Nature Preschool, which is a 15-minute drive from where I live. So I got to talking to her, and she connected with me with some people. And before you know it, I had an idea of what I wanted to do. And I'm fortunate enough to have a wonderful parcel of land behind our school that was unused and owned by the district. And I wrote my dissertation without the actual PhD and presented it to my administration. And long story short, they fell for it. They went for it. And 7 or 8 years later, here we are, going nice and strong.
That is the best story I have heard all day. That is fantastic.
Yeah,
Well, and I'm curious, what about it? Because districts, because of No Child Left Behind, are so intent on those test scores and so intent on cramming stuff down to children who aren't yet ready to learn the stuff that they want them to learn. And so that must have been an
What
awesome.
was the hook? What do you think got him?
Well, a lot of what I focused on was really focusing on what I knew the district was interested in. And I knew
Sure.
they wanted, how is this new approach going to go along with our mission? And how is it going to go along with the expectations that we have, not only from within the district, but from within the community? So a lot of my research was spent on, you know what, there are so many, there's so much research out there. There's so much data that shows that these experiences don't distract or detract away from kids being able to reach these skills and these scores,
Sure.
but they give them a much wider and deeper foundation of skills that not only will pay off right at that level, but they'll pay off years down the line. So I really played the short and long term game with them and said, hey, the research shows these opportunities are not a waste of time. They're not a distraction from their work. This is their work, and this is where they can learn in a meaningful and more a memorable way that will stick, and that they'll retain their skills. So much of early based childhood that I've seen is just, fact crunching and memorizing. And after they go to kindergarten, they go to first grade, you see those kids that were doing so well at the end of kindergarten are starting to are getting attention because of low scores at first grade. And you're like, well, why didn't it retain it? Because it wasn't meaningful for them. They were just doing it because it was something that they felt they had to do.
Yes. Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. And so you decided and you got approval. So then what happened?
Well, then there was the story of actually trying to figure out what to do. I was very inspired by my ideas, and I had lots of things I wanted to do, but then really figuring out how to put it into action. So the district gave me 4 specific basic caveats to the program. One is I've got approval about a week and a half before the school year started.
Oh,
So the first thing I
wow.
did, yeah, the
Oh,
first thing
my.
I took my little lawnmower out and I made a trail. So that was my first thing I did. But there were 4 kind of steps that I had to pass before I could
Yeah.
officially be going. And the one is if a student said no, or if a parent said no, or family said no, it wasn't going to happen. So I could have done all this work and sent out my letter. And if one family said, I'm not so sure about that, then, well, it was a no. Luckily, I did send a letter. Some of my friends and teachers say, you never really actually sent that letter, did you? I did send a letter. No one said they didn't want to be a part of it. So that was a good thing to do. The district also said, well, you know what? You have to focus on funding sources. We're not going to pay for a lot of the resources right now. And that makes sense. There's a lot of programs, education goes very circular, and things that disappear find their way back. And there's a lot of initiatives and programs that don't officially make it. So throwing a lot of money at them doesn't make a lot of sense. So, and I really didn't know what I needed. So I didn't know what I needed to buy. So it was kind of going into the dark, but I've been able to learn a lot about fundraising and grant writing, and just, reaching out to community members for that.
I'm
And
going to
then,
pause. I'm going to interrupt you.
yeah,
So, because of course me, in my brain, I'm like, do you really need money? I mean, you open the door and you go outside, and then you kind of reflect perhaps on what might, I'm thinking like the first thing I thought of was like flashlights. Like that was the
Mhm.
first thing that I thought of. But like, you're clearly not going to, well, and correct me because I haven't read your book yet.
Sure.
I'm thinking the intention is not to actually photocopy, like cut and paste an interior of a traditional school classroom outside. Like that's not the point. The point is, how do we use what nature has given us in order to still proceed towards meeting some of those goals and objectives? So I appreciate that you had that hesitation of like, you know what, I really don't know because we haven't done this before. Let's go outside and figure it out.
Yeah. And it turned out you didn't really need a lot of funding. Any
Yeah.
funding that really came into our program was focused on collaborating with the Nature Center, who of course needs some funding for their programming. But a lot of what I've been able to get is, working with community members, whether it's volunteers, whether it's Eagle Scouts and Girl Scout programs, whether it's people that just see what's happening and want to be a part of it. It's been a really easy way to get the things that are going to benefit the land. But ultimately, it's just the land. You go out there and you can see what the kids can create. But kind of going off on not wanting to replicate the indoor classroom in the outdoor environment,
Yeah.
that was my first mistake. My first year,
Oh,
which I loved. I loved doing it. It got a lot of great publicity for my classroom, for our district. It really looked good. But that first year, I look back and say, wow, it changes every year, of course, but that first year was something I'm not necessarily proud of. And I say that in that I really had, the planning, like today we're going to go outside and we're going to learn about this. And I'm going to read a book on this topic and the kids are going to go find this and it's going to be great. And they're going to deepen the understanding of this. And of course, that didn't happen.
That
Along
didn't
the way, they
happen.
saw a butterfly or there was a stick or something. And everything went south of where I wanted it to go. And it took me a while to say, no, don't worry about that. Look, I want to teach about this. This is what we're talking about today. And I really had to let go and say, you know what? It's not going to go the way I necessarily expect it, nor should
But
it.
it's going to go the way it needs to go.
Exactly. And once I was able to, you know what? I'm not going to try to wrap the kid around the curriculum. I'm going to wrap the curriculum around the kids and kind of see where that goes. Then it totally made more sense. I was able to let go. I was able to see, like, you know what, these kids are teaching themselves. They're teaching me. They're letting Mother Nature, who is a much better teacher than I could ever be, really guide their interest in instruction. And it just made life so much easier when we were outside.
So you had a nice learning curve yourself professionally, probably.
Oh, without question.
That first year too.
And it never stops.
I hope not, right? For any of us.
No, we have to we're always learning. So Peter, walk us through a day in kindergarten. Do you have a half day or a full day program?
Full day.
Oh my God. Walk it through a typical day in a true forest kindergarten or nature-based kindergarten.
And I want you to include, and I know you're a trail runner too, aren't you? Like I am? Yeah. So I want you to include the questions that I know you and I probably get after you do an ultra out on the trail. Where do you eat? How do you eat? Where do you pee? Where do you include that stuff? Because I know people think about that.
Oh, for sure. And a lot of these questions really determine of like, how is it like a day outside? It really depends on the time of year. Now, I'm fortunate enough where we have access to our building. Our land is right there. So we're not necessarily going out into far beyond. So and I always say, like, I don't consider myself a true nature-based program. I consider myself play-based and more nature-infused, because nature-based programs do really focus on you go outside and you stay outside. And there might not even be an indoor element to your program, or the indoor element is very minimal. Whereas our program is kind of a hybrid. We do have a lot of outdoor time, but we do have kind of the indoor element as well. Being in a public school, you have those resources that are certainly available that you don't necessarily have in other settings, but you also have other responsibilities, I like to call it. Some people like to call them hoops to jump and things like responsibilities that other programs may not necessarily have to deal with. So you kind of have to battle that. But so I'll go through a beginning of the year day, and then I'll kind of talk about an end of the year day. A beginning of the year day, it's really just getting to know the land. And so we might attack that land and really understand that land a little bit at a time in shorter doses. It's amazing how kids control their bladders when they want to, and how when you don't give them that opportunity to build that up, they need to go every 2 minutes. So we do spend a time kind of getting small doses of nature outside for half an hour at a time in one specific location, mostly, that we go back to and really kind of get to know that and slowly expand our circle. And we do a variety of things. The beginning of the year, it's late summer and fall. There's so many fun and easy things to do, the kids can do, that are more organized and structured. And there's clearly lots of opportunities for natural play, which is a huge part of what we do, not only at the beginning of the year, but throughout the year. But as the kids get more comfortable with the land, they're able to, go a little further out. They're able to do a number of things. They're able to assess their risks and take those opportunities. And as the year develops, they get more and more of those opportunities. And lots of people think, well, when winter comes, you guys, you shutter inside and you just wait until spring comes. And we go outside every day, unless it's like -30 and -50 wind chill. We're going to go outside for some element of time. And sure, some days getting geared up might actually be longer than the time we're actually outside. But they still have that experience, and it's amazing that if the kids get those daily exposures, how when it is actually cold, they're not cold because they're used to it. It's something that they're comfortable with, and they're just familiar with what it's like to get ready and what it's like to be outside. So outside in winter, again, lots of opportunities, lots of things that we're checking on. And as the year goes on, their experiences obviously are going to change over the seasons. But once spring hits, we're not inside. we may go inside we still have lunch for the most part, lunch inside,
Mhm.
unless we have special days where we ask kids to bring their lunch. Otherwise, they do have options for indoor lunch. And they have specials, which they don't miss, like art and fitness and things like that. But a lot of those teachers are also very open to taking kids outside for their time as well. So when spring hits, it's very, very, we're outside. And if I have my walkie-talkie and my cell phone, if I need to be reached and the kids know where to go, I'm able to kind of stand at one particular stump that's in the middle of one of our open areas, and I can see the whole land. And the kids have, basically access to all the areas that they've been working on for 100 some days. And a lot of people, when they first hear that, I let them kind of go, they're like, well, aren't you worried about them getting lost? Aren't you worried about them getting hurt? Aren't you worried about what other people think? And no, I mean, yes, there's obviously risk in that, but there's risk in everything. And the kids know that they've had so many times to practice assessing the risk, and they know that this is their responsibility. And if they can't be trusted in their environment, they lose that privilege and that right to be able to go to certain elements. And, it's just, they police themselves for the most part, and I'm there to kind of just sit back and see what they can do and learn from them. And it's a really exciting time. And the best way to tell people about it is just to invite them in.
Sure.
And when people
Sure.
come and they see it, they get it.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain it until you actually see it. And when you see it, everyone's like, oh, okay, I see why you're doing it, and I see why it's happening, and I see the value of it.
It's that picture's worth 1,000 words, so
Mhm.
to speak.
For sure.
Deb, I saw you want to jump in. I'm going to ask a logistical question. So if I was a kid in your class, I would get, in theory, dropped off in that classroom, and then we venture from the classroom out.
Correct.
And then my other question was, talk about the winter boots and snow pants. Is there a cloakroom? Where's all that going when we're not using it? Do you have space for that? Do you have
We're lucky.
extras?
Yeah, we're lucky enough and fortunate to have lockers right outside our
Okay.
kindergarten classrooms. So they have their cubbies that they come with at the beginning of the year, and the lockers are basically empty. And then as more gear is needed for outside, we kind of developed this, that if you need it for inside, it's inside your cubbies. If it's needed for outside, it's outside the room in the lockers.
Got it. Okay.
We also have a lot of extra gear.
Yeah.
I tend to buy extra gear from, secondhand shops, dollar stores,
Sure.
things like that, things that they have a lot of donations from previous families that have outgrown snow pants, boots. So my closet, a lot of people's closets are filled up with, strategy games and flashcards and math manipulatives. And if you go into mine, you've got, here's the bird feeder section, here's the snow pants section, here's that. So it can be sometimes hard to juggle all the materials that you need. And I'm a person who can't say no, even if it's something I don't know how I'd use it. If someone's going to say, hey, do you want that? Oh yeah. Like, I'll take
Figure
it.
it out, right?
I'll figure it out.
Exactly.
Peter, I think one of the big things that I think people go, oh my God, it's so dangerous, blah, 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 blah. So I loved how you were talking about children have learned how to assess their own risk. And how have you seen that take place over time? Like from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, what have you noticed and how do you support them in doing that? And then I'm going to step away, but still listen because I have a cat that's misbehaving. I'll be right back.
Well, the joy of risk is that for me, it's just such a word that is so misunderstood. And lots of times people kind of connect risk and hazard as being the same thing. And they're dramatically different. And I want my kids to take risk. Risk is healthy. And I want to give them opportunities where they can become assessors of their own risk. And they have that natural instinct anyway. So at the beginning of the year, usually on day 1 or 2, we go out, and I like to call it my fallen tree assessment. I do a lot of assessments that are not really paper pencil, let's say, or on the computer screen. And we talk a little bit about the basics of climbing trees and safety and those basic things, because you never know what these kids come in with different experiences.
Sure.
And there's a couple different trees that are fallen in the forest, and most of them are very flat to the ground, maybe a little bit of elevation, but certainly nothing that's going to be dramatically difficult or dangerous for the kids. But we talk about it. We show them the different levels of trees. There's kind of a beginning tree, which is basically on the ground, a medium-sized tree, and then there's the big tree, which they really love. And we talk about it for a few minutes, and then I watch them. And
Yeah.
within that 5 minutes, you can tell so quickly, okay, who are my leaders? Who are my followers? Who are my cautious friends? Who are my care to the wind? They go things? Who are the ones that were really paying attention? Who are the ones that, I might need to keep an extra eye on? But
Hmm.
you can see by just watching them, they're kind of calculating different things as they go. And they
And you can
know,
probably see it, right?
oh yeah, those wheels are turning, and you're figuring, okay, what are they thinking about? And sometimes, yeah, most of the time you kind of just let them kind of develop and figure out what they're doing. But sometimes you can see that, they want to ask a question, or they want you to talk to them, and you just talk about them. And I try to avoid those things like, oh, be careful, that because those
Hmm.
might seem nice, but those can be very distracting. But instead of asking questions like, oh, how you feel up there, things like that, and that gives them a chance to share their emotions. And if you can tell that they're okay, there's some anxiety, there's some stress there, we always talk about, well, how do we get out of that uncomfortable zone where we don't feel safe anymore? And the kids know that, if I'm at this level of the tree and that friend's ahead of me, but they want to get down, they're not going to jump down. They want to go backwards, which means I have to go backwards too. So they have to they begin to understand and
Collaboration.
take care of each other that way. But
Oh,
yeah,
it's just
Deb,
absolutely beautiful.
are you hearing, Deb, the same as I am, the overlap between some of the conversations we've had with Mike Huber and putting the
Mhm.
children, not putting them, but allowing them to be out there and allowing them to start to self-assess instead of saying things like, be careful. And instead of saying things like, you can go to that next branch, like
Yeah.
letting the kids
Mhm.
decide. Oh, lots of overlap here. I'm loving it.
I love it. And instead of you asking the children, do you feel safe? You're saying, how do you feel up there?
Mhm.
If you're seeing them start to get hesitant. I just remember climbing the pecan trees in my yard. And there were days when I would say, oh, I think I'm high enough. But I think because we don't let children assess their own risk, we're like, don't do that. Be careful. You're
Mhm.
climbing too high. They never learn that assessing their own risk,
Mhm.
which puts them into lots of trouble when they get older because they haven't had that practice.
Oh, for sure. And I see it on the more traditional playgrounds. You see kids
Uh-huh.
that don't have those opportunities to assess the risk. And the way we sort of, bubble wrap a lot of our playgrounds right now, kids don't know how to fall. So when they're in an area that's not protected in that same way, there's just a lot more injuries. So the kids
Oh,
have, I love being out in nature with them because, nature isn't rubber. Nature doesn't bounce the way those things do. And the kids, they
right.
learn, sometimes they learn the hard way, but they learn. And I, I, kids, a lot of the questions people ask is like, well, what about like broken arms and like all the dangers of falling? It's like, besides your typical scrapes and things like that, I don't necessarily have those issues. Not that they can't happen, of course, but it's just something kids just they're much better risk assessors, and they take care of their bodies a lot better than I think adults give them credit for. We see ourselves
100%.
as the caretakers who have to, make sure nothing happens. And when we do that, we're almost setting them up for something to happen when they're not necessarily being watched. So I'm
That's
okay.
so true, Peter. So I
There's
have a question about what the first grade teachers think when they get your kid.
Uh-oh. Well, I like to
we
call it,
don't go outside. I hope you had fun last year.
yeah, you know what? I joke, but it's a serious joke that I've had the hardest people to work with. And I don't mean that hard in that they're defiant or angry, but the hardest people to convince about the value and validity of what I'm trying to do with these kids is with other teachers. Just because teachers tend to want to be in control. They tend to feel that anxiety and stress of the things that they're responsible for. And that is just, in my 16 years teaching, that has increased so much,
Oh,
so
yeah.
dramatically over these few years. So, anything new or anything that you don't feel necessarily completely comfortable about or passionate about, it's really hard to convince. So, but I knew that the way it works in a lot of districts, if something goes well, let's see if it can go well in other places. So I knew that there was going to be this positive pressure to kind of try it in other ways. So that was really the impetus for me working with the Retzer Nature Center and creating the whole school collaboration. I knew that there were going to be some teachers that weren't comfortable. It was not mandated by administration. They highly encouraged it. And actually having COVID come, although it's, been not a great experience by any means, it has allowed more teachers in classrooms that maybe were a little hesitant to go outside, even if it's just going right outside the walls, maybe not out into the woods, into the prairie, but just a little bit more outside and seeing that, okay, there is some benefit to this. It's not this overwhelming, like I have to be a nature expert to be able to do this. Like there's that feeling that if you're not trained in environmental education, going outside is something that's a problem. If you have the feeling that taking kids out into nature is going to have them get crazy and wild and break those behaviors or get those behaviors out, then they're going to get crazy and wild and do those behaviors. But if you treat it like what it is, which is just a classroom in a different setting, and set forth that expectation that, no, this is just a place where we learn, I don't see those issues necessarily coming up. And it takes experience. I mean, the first time kids go out, there could be a little bit more excitement than you might normally see, but you can't let that take over, and that feeling of, oh my gosh, I'm helpless out here. What, the kids are going to just run rimshot over me. It's over. And like, you've got to just calm down, take a breath. And so knowing that other teachers might feel that anxiety, and knowing that they might feel pressure specifically from families that are very happy with the program, well, like, why don't you go outside as much? That was the whole focus of the collaboration was with the Nature Center, was to give those classes multiple times a year where they were to go out in nature, and it was led by the naturalist teachers at the Nature Center, so that our teachers, especially the ones that maybe weren't so excited or nervous about it, could just sit back and watch and be them, not focused about teaching a lesson or leading the group, just to be a part of the group. And I know a lot of teachers have appreciated that and have taken that next step of trying it on their own since that collaboration started.
Such a great model too, to sort of baby step them in, right?
Mhm.
And to let someone else take the lead
Yeah.
at the Nature
A little
Center.
safer.
Yes, it makes them feel a little safer, and they begin to see that value. When you were talking about, teachers' anxiety about the children going wild, I keep reflecting back to the toddler teacher who puts a slide in the classroom, and all the children want to go down the slide, and everybody wants to go down, and there's pushing and screaming and shoving, and she throws it out in the hallway and says, that didn't work. And I'm like, no.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It's like you're detoxing them off of that.
Yeah.
Right. And it just becomes, they have to acclimate it to it. And then it's not, we don't, but I have to anticipate that, like, because I don't know if they've had that before, to where it's just something they approach as just another thing. I have a little tease question. I'm wondering, have you been approached to loop and do a first grade and then the kinder, or a mixed ages? Have you had parents say, can you be their first grade teacher too, please?
Oh, yeah, parents ask that all the time. They want to see their kids get those experiences. I always joke that I'm waiting for some sort of financial windfall to come through, where I can be turned into, instead of the classroom teacher, the nature teacher for the entire school, and kind of be like an extra special, where they go to art, they go to fitness, up now they go to nature, and something like that. But yeah,
Wouldn't
it's
that
always
be amazing?
that would be a lot of fun. That would be cool. And but yeah, there's always those families and parents, and specifically kids, that they want to continue to
Well,
do
they
that.
see the benefit. And
Oh,
I think
sure.
that's a nod to you and your vision and your, like your chutzpah, as we call it, to go and approach and say, I don't know if this is going to get approved or not, but I feel this passion. And so let's go see what we can do to make it happen.
For
I'm
sure.
excited.
Oh my goodness. Peter, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for sharing this. And we'll have to have you back so that you can give us, this was like entry level stuff. Now we have to build on it with the next Porch Play Chat, where we can help people see that what's possible, right? Instead of what they can't do. I always say, what's possible, right? So even if you go out for an hour a day in the beginning, right? So if you have a space near you,
It
So
doesn't.
I'm going to close this out, but don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. So hang in.
Sounds good.
So,
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Peter. So to learn more about Porch Play Chats, be sure to visit our website at IPA-USA.org. And until next time, and Peter's book, which I will put in the YouTube channel and on the Facebook page. And until next time, keep on playing.
Bye-bye.